My name is Betsy Struxness. I grew up in Kansas City, Missouri, and I started dancing when I was probably about 5. I remember being in a studio. It may have actually been in Knoxville, Tennessee, where I was born. They had an exercise where they had us dance away from the bar, and my sister and I were in class together, and I remember we were about the only two that didn't just decide to skip around the room. We actually decided to dance and do turns, and I think that's when my parents were like, oh, something's happening here. I mainly studied with what was then State Ballet of Missouri and what is now Kansas City Ballet, and I studied there for 12 years. Thought for a long time that I was going to be a ballerina. I did theater from the time I was 6 years old. The first production I did was Madame Butterfly at the Lyric Opera in Kansas City, where I played a mute little boy. And then I also worked at Starlight Theater in Kansas City doing Annie when I was like 7 and The King and I. So I loved theater too, but there was something about dance that just really pulled my focus. I guess when I was 6, I told my parents that I was going to be on Broadway. And I'm not even sure at the time I knew what Broadway actually was. I just sort of heard of it as an entity. And then I just, with dance as so much of my background, I knew that I had to perform. So it was never really a specific choice of like, yeah, this is what I'm gonna do. It was always just like, oh, well, this is what I'm gonna do. I came here at age 14 for School of American Ballet's summer program and absolutely fell in love with the city. You know, got to see a Broadway show and just loved it. And when I went back to Kansas City after that summer, I told my parents, I was like, well, that's where I'm going after high school. Sorry about it. The first Broadway show I was in was Wicked, and I was very lucky in that it was not very nerve-wracking because it was actually the 3rd production of Wicked I'd done. I was in Wicked in Chicago and then Wicked in San Francisco, and then I filled in for somebody's medical leave on Broadway, and so it was sort of like a non-taxing Broadway debut. It was great because I was like, oh, show I'm familiar with, people I know, this is great. You really do get transported sort of to your childhood and to your childlike self of just being like, I'm performing on a Broadway stage. And at the end of my Broadway debut, I got a little teary-eyed at the bow because I was like, I did it. If I never do it again, I at least did it once. I at least got here. It's harder than people think. It's harder emotionally, I think, more than it is physically. As a dancer, you're kind of low man on the totem pole as far as like entertainers go. You know, singers and actors are usually sort of put on a little more of a pedestal, and you're sort of the one that does all the grunt work. But at the same time, it's so incredibly satisfying because of how physical it is that you get out, you know, you can get out your nerves and you can just express yourself really wildly and like with abandon, and it's really wonderful. It's really exciting to be here today and just very, very humbling. I think as a performer, you always hope that you sort of get recognized and, you know, that you get accolades, but then when it actually happens, it's kind of just, I tend to turn a little inward and find it hard to sort of accept. So it's been fun because it's like you're forced to accept that, you know, what you're doing is making an impact. And that's kind of all you can hope for as a performer, is that it makes an impact and that it inspires people. And I hope that's what I'm doing.